I've never walked alone. Nah. 'Cause you're faithful to the end, and closer than a friend, and your love will never fail. In every season you are there. Faithful.
Well, welcome back to another fun-filled Recovering Preacher's Kids podcast where we ask all the questions and say all the embarrassing things because nobody else will do it, so we might as well. Which leads me to my question for the day of do you have a moment or a memory? And if you don't, it's okay. You can say, I don't have it, or you're killing me and I'm absolutely not going to tell you anything. But can you think off the top of your head of like a most embarrassing moment, like, or maybe you were in a situation and you thought, I'm not getting out there in front of everybody because I would be embarrassed. Like you found yourself being a little smaller, like hiding in the back of a crowd as an adult. Because
As
like
an
I'll tell
adult.
you, like I cannot dance. Like the rhythm line in heaven when I was being created, I guess I just skipped that line. I have zero rhythm. And so like I'm not gonna dance. I'm not going to get in front of people and dance. That's never going to happen. Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. It would take a lot of work for me to do that because the thought of sitting here thinking about like getting in front of people and dancing makes me want to vomit. Do you have like a thing that you're just like, I would never do that because I would be embarrassed or
Let's
whatever?
see.
Do you have a
Let me
thing?
think. I probably do. I just have like mental block. I think I block it all out and pretend like it doesn't happen. You know, probably my first one is just standing up at church and singing. I
Ooh,
don't
I
know.
didn't think
That
about
that
that
like
one.
that like
I
just
can't
gives
sing
me,
either.
you know, well, I used to could, but I don't know if the dealing now is the older you get between allergies and reflux or whatever, my voice is not what it used to be. Cracks a lot more and I don't sing on tune. I don't even know how the note sounds, but I don't know. Yeah, that gives me such anxiety to have to stand up there and
Well,
sing.
do you know what amazes me? I have 4 grandkids, you have 3, and my grandkids are 8, 5, 3, and 2. And I'm gonna tell you, them little heifers are not embarrassed to do anything. You turn on music in, like, a public setting, and they gonna get after it. Now,
Yup.
God love them, they're like their Gigi, they got no rhythm, but they're gonna get after it. And, last night we were watching them, and Merida is the only girl out of 4, so she has 3 brothers, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna send out a prayer request to the RPK family now. We need to be praying for her future husband because I'm telling you, she is a force, and she has decided that she does not need to take gymnastics, she just knows how to do them. And she is very confident in her abilities. And if you do not applaud the tricks that she does, she will turn around and say, clap for me. Clap for me. So last night she calls them handstands, but
And
it's where she just gets on her head and flips herself up against the wall. And so she was like, Papa, look at me doing my handstands. And he said, well, that's a headstand. She said, maybe for you. Okay. Sister girl's doing a hand stand, not a head stand because her hands were on the floor. Anyway,
makes sense.
but it's interesting to me to watch them, and I'm sure you can say the same thing about your grandkids, how unashamed, unabandoned, unembarrassed they are. And I saw something not too long ago that, do you remember when we were kids how Trix cereal was shaped like fruit?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's round balls now. It's not fruit, it's just round balls. And it said the whole thing that I saw on my feed, it was like, what if Trix still looks like fruit to kids? But because we're adults, it's round balls. And it like wrecked my whole life. It just wrecked me because then it got me thinking about my grandkids and stuff. And it's like, why do we lose that as we get older? You would think like as you mature, you get smarter, but I think we get dumber
Yeah.
because kids are just so pure and they're not worried about what other people think, and they're not worried about what they look like, but it's like as we get older, all of a sudden we start caring about that
Karen.
crap.
And I don't know where that comes from. That was like for last week, last Friday, we went to the hockey game down in Pensacola, and Lauren, Cody, and the kids came over, and I just sat there and I watched. And that was the way Will Brady and Amelia were. I mean, the music would come on and they would stand up, and I mean, they were showing out and dancing. And I just would get so tickled because everybody around us was laughing and watching them, and they were just putting on a show. And Amelia's one, the more you give her attention and laugh, the more we kind of
Mm.
indulge a little bit more. But anyway, they were performing so well, you know how children dance, that like the camera picked them up twice and put them on the big screen,
Okay.
and they were dancing. But however, I did know one time when it happened, and we were like, "Oh, look, Will Brady, you're on the big camera." He like stopped and sat down and didn't move for a while. But then the next time he didn't care, he just kept right on going. But then anyway, it was during that time that it just kinda hit me. I mean, I'm that, the faith of a child that Jesus was talking about, that, it's the kingdom of heaven is like the children, and you think about
Mhm.
how children act. I'm not talking about the misbehaving. I mean, just the whole enjoying life. And where along did I get into not enjoying life or being told that you don't
Right.
enjoy life? What happened to, or where did I get the idea that if I'm having fun and enjoying life, then I'm doing something wrong? Like a Christian
Mm.
can't have fun. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
I don't know, because I think the same thing, like, when was the last time as an adult, do you know how kids are always like, "Watch me, watch me." Like,
Yeah.
they go to jump in the pool and they're like, "Watch me,"
Watch me.
like they're doing some kinda great trick, and I'm like, when was the last time I'm like, "Hey, watch me, watch me." You know? And I mean, we it's like we get so much smaller as we get older, and I can remember when I first became a believer. Or I've always believed in Jesus, but before
Follower.
I follow,
More a
before I
follower.
got myself in check. And I'm telling you, I was on fire and I would have just charged hell with a water pistol. You know what I'm saying? But I find that the longer that my walk goes, the quieter I get. And I'm almost like, dang, is maturity just like the kryptonite to it all? Is it, instead of getting stronger in our faith or getting stronger in who we are and even more confident in ourselves, do we find ourselves even more insecure and even more unsure? And I'm like, why is that? Why? I don't have an answer. I've just been pondering it lately because I'm going to tell you, my grandkids, they know everything. And if you don't think they know everything, you just ask them. They will tell you they know. They know the stuff.
And see, I don't know if some of it is, if we go back and do the analogy of like children and then the way they live versus as an adult, somewhere along the line, as we grew up, and you hit those awkward teenage years and then your teenage years, I can remember being told, well, we don't act that way, or you're acting weird, or you're weird. So, nobody wants to be labeled that. So you quit and you try to then imitate what everybody else is
Else
doing.
is doing.
And, and then I find I do that in my Christian walk too. I think we do that to new believers, and try to suppress their excitement. We don't act that way. We're Christian now. You can't be happy. If you're happy, then you're doing something. You're
Mhm.
supposed to look like a sourpuss, you know. Um, I mean, you remember, like, you can't run in church
Mhm.
because you don't run in God's house,
I remember that. Yeah.
you know? But quite honestly, the kids ran through the house, even though I told them sometimes, "We don't run in the house," but they ran in the house,
Mm.
because you felt comfortable. I know there's a reverence at church, and I guess this is where I'm struggling a little bit today. I know you need to come into God's presence with reverence. Don't get me wrong. But where have we lost the
The joy.
joy?
The
Yeah.
joy of our salvation and the joy of the life that God has given us.
And the comfortable, like, I'm so comfortable. Like, you are at home where you can be yourself and you're comfortable. Where did we lose that at church?
No, well, and even in like just your day to day walk as a Christian,
Yeah.
like, it's not like a coat you put on. Do you know what I'm saying? And maybe for some people that is. And I think that's a struggle for me because it's like, how do you balance the people are going to just listen to this podcast and be like, y'all are nuts because I struggle with how do you balance? I don't want to be fake. One of
Yeah.
the hardest things for me as a preacher's kid, a recovering preacher's kid, is hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because as a preacher's kid, and I doesn't matter if you were a preacher's kid in the 80s or you're a preacher's kid
Mhm.
today, you see the
Mhm.
hypocrisy. And
Yes.
now do not get me wrong, there is hypocrites at CVS and Walgreens and in your job and everywhere, and I understand that. But as a preacher's kid, we see hypocrisy in a totally different
Mhm.
way because what we see or saw in our home is someone who supports your family and your father one day and then votes you out of the church the next day.
Next day.
Okay. So I'm talking like people who support you and then cause you to be homeless. And so that is kind of what our life as a preacher's kid was, which has caused us to have trust issues as adults, but it's like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I
Right.
don't
I
want to
don't.
be that person. I want to be 100% me, no matter if I'm at church, if I'm at home, if I'm at work. I don't want it to be a code. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. Okay. Like we're not
Right.
supposed to,
Right.
be fake. But that's a struggle for me to have not to have reverence in the church building. I don't mean that, but to balance that out across the board and not feel awkward and weird. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
is I want to live a clean, pure, non-hypocritical life and not feel weird. Is that too much to ask for?
That's a lot. That's
That's
a lot.
that's
But you're
kind of
not
what I
alone
want.
because I'm the same way. And I mean, that's me. It's almost like, I don't know, because I don't want to say it, but I was like, I could smell, like if somebody's not being
Mhm.
real. You know what I'm saying? If they're
Yes.
like they're just putting on a show. I mean, I can spot it in a heartbeat. And
Yes.
it comes from the way we grew up. Because, one day you thought things were one way and then you turn around and it's was right the opposite and we were gone. Um, but um I struggle with the same thing because I end up doing that because it comes up to being I'm in a performance mode, you can say, when I'm at church or I'm out. And for me, maybe it's a little I don't know if you find this because, I guess dad was a preacher here. I can find myself performing in my day-to-day outside my house in town because everybody knows our family.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? So I
It
still
does
find
make sense.
myself performing and not being myself. But then we went on this trip this weekend and like we did a lot of antiquing and going junking or whatever. And and they're always playing music. And I caught myself
Uh-huh.
several times singing, walking down the aisle, dancing a little bit or whatever, being in my own little world. But I wasn't here. I was somewhere else to where
Interesting.
I know. And that's what a big struggle is for me is like I don't know. I can't find and maybe it's security. Maybe the whole thing is secure. I'm not secure to be, I don't know myself, outside where people knew us, but if I go outside an area that nobody knows me, then okay. Not that I'm not act like a fool. Don't get me wrong. That I act like a totally different. That I'm not acting as a believer. It's just I'm
It's
more of a
it's okay. I mean, because at the end of the day, my track record, I can act a fool real quick. So it's okay. You're in good company. Weird how, like, I feel like I can remember being a young I mean, let's face it, I had kids at 12, you know what I'm saying? I
Not
mean,
really, people. She
not really
really
12.
didn't.
I mean, I had Christina when I was 18, so I was a young mother, young married I've been married my whole life, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so I can remember being in my early 20s, young mom, young married woman, dumb as a rock. And I looked at people who were in their 50s and I thought they had it together. Like, and I can remember being in my 20s being like, I cannot wait to be 30 because when I'm 30, Christina will be 12 and Gabe will be 8. And in my mind, if I could just make it till I was 30, I would have had it figured out enough. And my kids would be 12 and 8. They would be normal people. I would be a normal person. And then I got 30 and realized that was a lie. And so then I was like, people that are 50 seem to have it together. Like they seem to get it. And I'm like, okay, so when I'm 50, my children will be grown adults. I'll be like a whole real adult then, like I will so understand how the world works and I'll have it together. And then I got here and I still don't have a clue. I don't have a clue and I still struggle with the same things. And maybe that's part of the innocence of a child is they're never looking to the next thing. Like they're just content and happy with where they are in that moment. And like your Will Prady and Amelia, they just loved the hockey game and they weren't really worrying about where they were going to go after the hockey game. And my problem
Mm,
is when I'm in the moment, I can't really enjoy the moment because I'm wondering where we're going next and what's going to happen next. And then, when it's over, we got to walk to the car and do we remember where we parked and how are we going to get out of traffic? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm kind of
yes.
using the analogy, but I do the same thing in my spiritual walk and in everyday life. Like I take for granted that I'm gonna have one more moment, that I'm gonna have one more opportunity, that I'm so just caught up in myself that I believe God is gonna give me the grace to do this one more time. Well, what if that is the last time?
Mm, mm.
Not trying to be morbid, but what if
But
it
what if?
is? And I've missed the opportunity to worship with everything I have in me at church on Sunday. What if that's the last time I'm going to worship this side of heaven? But I'm caught up in whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm realizing that's part of my problem is I'm thinking of the next thing as if I'm going to be granted the next thing.
Maybe so. Because I mean, I can remember, were you one of these, you had to read out loud in school? I
Yeah,
hated
girl,
that.
that's when anxiety started because I was counting paragraphs to figure out which one I was going to have to read so I could read over it real quick and make sure it wasn't big words.
See, but that was me. I would count how many people ahead of me, and then I would count down the paragraphs, and I would scan it to make sure it didn't have any words I did not know how to pronounce. And maybe that's where our whole thing is. We're looking for. I'm going ahead and preparing for the next event or whatever, and not like you say, not enjoying.
The
But where
here
did
and
that? I
now.
don't know. But where did that come from? Is that something as an adult? Is that a lie that we've heard from Satan that you can't enjoy life
Well, and
or
but the thing is now that we know, what do you do with
do
it?
with it?
What do you do with the information? What do you think the key is for just being like, one thing, okay, like my little granddaughter, when she is done with something, she'll just go, that's done. And we move on. We're done with that. That's done. And so, so how do you, as an adult, do you think we just go, that's done? And we just roll on with the thing because I think that we have taught ourselves that we're not allowed to do that. We've told ourselves we can't just move on from things and be like, "Oh, I'm going to choose a different path." Like we make things so hard.
Are we the only one that does this?
I mean, I hope not. I hope not because if we are, I want the key. I mean, cuz I don't live a miserable life. I don't wanna make it come across that way. I
Yeah.
love my life. I'm a happy person. I am. I just have a lot of issues, and I guess I'm just not afraid to talk about them. The
You just
list
brought
is
me along.
long and
You brought me along for the ride because
the
I'm
the list
struggling
is
with
long
talking.
and distinguished.
I have issues,
I
but I just don't always talk about them.
just have so many questions as an adult now,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know, maybe if I would have asked them as a child, I wouldn't have so many questions now, but I
But
do,
maybe
I just have so many questions.
I don't know, maybe that was just, like, how the generations went because now I don't make a statement every now and then that or she'll talk about something with the kids, and she was just like, "Well, does it change?" Especially, like, worrying about your kids, and I was like, "No, it never changes."
You just
It
level
just
up.
yeah, you just I go, You're an adult now, you're 30 whatever. I still have worry. There's things. It does not change. And, and just that quick, I forgot which direction I was going with that.
And that's for another podcast. The fact that the older you get, the more you lose your mind.
But maybe that's just the way I don't know, maybe I just move on. Maybe that was just was something, before we started the podcast, I prayed and asked God, not supposed to say something, just close my mouth. So there you go. The thought just went away so undoubtedly. I wasn't supposed to say this.
No, I'm tracking with what you're saying because when we do level up as parents and our worry just changes for our children over time. But the thing is I think we also level up in our uncertainties because we look around and see everybody else. And especially right now we live in a world inundated with perfection with social media. Everybody's putting out their best
Yeah,
forward,
yeah.
and so it causes us to feel less than or unsure. And so maybe that's part of it is we're leveling up more and more about, oh, I shouldn't do that. I can't say that. I can't do this. I can't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we just have more. I don't even want to use the word anxiety. I look at it as more bondage because sometimes that's how I feel. I feel very bound by the rules or the unknown or the uncertainties. So because I'm so bound, I just like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna stand
Mm,
here and be invisible, which is what the
do
enemy
that
wants at the end of the day. I
today.
mean, because I am quite a loudmouth, and I'm sure he's like, that one right there, and so getting me bound to where I just stand still and disappear, that would be his greatest act. And I think that I'm constantly having to fight that because that's not what God called me to be.
Yeah. And maybe that's where we are right now is to talk about it because just like you made the statement that you thought if you could just get to 30, you thought people who had 30 had it together and then moved it to 50. Oh, when you're 50, you have it all together. Maybe that's what we just need to do and be quite vulnerable and honest so that those that are in their 20s and 30s right now, when you hit 50, you don't have it all together. So we don't give that perception and just say, "Hey, let's stop this cycle of you have to have it, all together. You're supposed to have the answers by the time you get here, because it is an evolving thing, and just enjoy the ride as you go through the years." So I'm closer now to 60 than I used to be. That's kind of scary to think about. So I need to just hold on to the roller coaster and enjoy the last few
Look, I told
curves.
somebody not too long ago, I have thrown out the idea of when I get here because I've reached an age now I can't even grow hair anymore, you know? And so I'm like, if I can't even grow hair on my head, then how in the world am I going to understand what is happening? But like you said, I think that part of it is just coming to a place of acceptance. And maybe that's
Mm,
what Jesus meant when he was like, come to me like a child, is that we don't have the answers, you know, and maybe we do ask and be vulnerable about it.
for us preachers' kids, maybe that's why we struggle with it a little bit more than other people. It's because we were always called on and we had to have the right answer at Bible study or Sunday school or whatever. I don't know. Did you ever have to experience that? Like you always got called on? If there was a question and nobody answered, you got
Well,
called on? So
let's
therefore,
admit, I am feral. And so I'm sure there were a lot of Sunday school teachers who thought, we ain't calling on that one. But I did get called on quite a bit. Yes, I did. But I'm sure there were times based on the look on my face, they thought we are moving on.
So maybe that's part of mine is that, okay, I got to work on, I'm already thinking of formulating the answer. So therefore I've got to know the answer and not just coming to him and going like, I don't understand.
Do you
I don't get
think that
this.
you're trying to formulate an answer to a question that's never even been asked?
I do that all the time now. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been challenged with talking about the children. So I just need to go back to acting like a child. Therefore, if you see me dancing down and doing flips down the aisle at Piggly Wiggly over the next
Saying, watch me.
watch me, y'all just turn the other way and just she's acting like a child.
Well, but the joy of our life, because, the truth of the matter is, as followers of Christ, earth is what is that? What do they say? That as a believer, a follower of Christ, earth is the only hell we'll ever see, but to a non believer, it's the only heaven they'll ever
Heaven.
see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that maybe we need to start enjoying, and because we're learning now how we're going to act in heaven. And I mean, I know in heaven we're perfect and everything's wonderful. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm so caught up in the day to day and the stuff here. We need to let that go so that we learn how to be unashamed and unabandoned and worship with everything we have, like a child, and be like Amelia and Will Brady at the hockey game.
All right, y'all, that's a wrap for today's episode. If something in this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, or just made you feel seen, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them. Send it to a friend, drop it in a group chat, or post it on your story. That kind of support means the world to us. You always find every episode, updates, and more over at therecoveringpreacherskids.com. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'll see you next time.